The Mojave desert sky blazed with deep crimson sunset, the last rays of the day stretching the shadows of the cactus bushes along the desolate stretch of Highway 58. About 20 miles east of Edwards Air Force Base, an old gas station stood alone in the parched land. Its desert stop sign faded and fluttering in the scorching wind. Inside the convenience store, the whir of the air conditioner mingled with the twang of country music spilling from an old radio. Jim Dawson, the elderly gas station owner with silver hair and a face etched with the lines of 40 years spent in the desert, stood behind the counter, quietly wiping the dust off a ceramic coffee mug. It was just another ordinary day, or at least that's what he thought. Outside, the distant roar of engines began to echo, softly at first like a whispering breeze, but gradually growing more intense, shaking the cracked, dry earth beneath. Jim glanced through the dusty window, his eyes flashing with a hint of caution. He had heard the rumors about the Iron Vipers, a notorious biker gang in the area known for causing trouble from Barstow all the way to Victorville. The sound of the engines grew louder, and then 5 shiny Harley-Davidsons appeared, circling the gas station like a pack of wolves on the hunt. The riders wore black leather jackets, with a coiled iron snake embroidered on their chests, their eyes glowing red like smoldering coals. Leading the pack was a hulking figure named Travis Claw Maddox, his long hair tied back and his studded gloves sparkling in the light of the setting sun. But it wasn't the biker gang that caught Jim's attention first. From the opposite side of the road, an old white van rolled slowly over the melting asphalt, making its way into the gas station. The sliding door opened and a woman appeared. Emily Carter, around 35 years old, sat in a specially adapted wheelchair, her strong hands confidently pushing the wheels. Her brown hair was neatly tied back, and her deep blue eyes shone with an unusual calmness. Next to her were 2 dogs, Storm, a Belgian Malinois with sleek black fur, and Raven, the other one with eyes sharp as daggers. Both wore service vests, lying quietly beside the van, their ears perked up, but no one could guess that they were anything but ordinary dogs. Jim looked out the window, his hand resting on the coffee cup. He had seen many strange things during his years in the Mojave, but there was something about Emily that felt different. Maybe it was the way she moved without hesitation, without a hint of weakness, even as the titanium prosthetic glinted in the sunlight when she stepped out her wheelchair to check the gas tank. Or perhaps it was the way Storm and Raven surveyed their surroundings, not with the curiosity of pets, but with the focus of trained warriors. "Hey, you guys," Travis bellowed, his voice rough like the growl of his motorcycle engine. He killed the engine, stepped off his Harley, and his heavy boots thudded against the ground. "Look at this. We got a disabled lady and 2 little pups here. Must have gotten lost coming from some campsite." The other bikers burst into laughter, their voices echoing through the stillness of the gas station. One guy named Hank, with a snake tattoo coiling around his neck, spat on the ground, his eyes locked onto Emily. "Hey there. Sweetheart, this desert ain't no place for someone like you. You need us to escort you back home." Emily didn't answer right away. She slowly closed the gas cap, her right hand gently brushing over Storm's head, as if she were reassuring it or maybe herself. "Thanks for the offer," she said, her voice steady but cold, "but I can handle it." She turned her wheelchair toward the store, her eyes briefly scanning the Iron Vipers group, noting each of their positions with the precision of someone who was familiar with the battlefield. Travis stepped closer, his muscular arms crossed over his chest. "You think you can handle it? With that wheelchair and those 2 puppies? Listen up, sis, out here we make the rules. Anyone who crosses into Mojave without giving us a heads up won't be leaving in one piece." He leaned down, face to face with Emily, his breath reeking of beer. "By the way, your dogs are pretty cute. How about we teach them a few fun tricks?" Jim, from inside the store, felt the atmosphere start to grow heavy. He had been a Marine during the Vietnam War, and the old fighting instincts within him suddenly surged to life. His hand quietly moved down to the counter, where he kept an old handgun not for use, but as a precaution. Through the glass, he saw Storm and Raven still lying still, but their ears twitched slightly, as if they were listening to every breath of the biker gang. Emily looked up at Travis, her eyes filled with unwavering courage. "They don't need anyone to teach them," she said, her voice low but sharp as a knife. A smile flickered across her lips, Not the friendly kind, but the confident grin of someone who knows the power they hold. Travis's laughter faded away. He frowned, feeling as if he had just been challenged. "All right then," he growled. "If you're going to be so stubborn, let's see what you and those dogs can really do." He signaled to Hank and two other guys, who began to move in, surrounding Emily and the van in a loose circle. Hank stepped closer to Storm, pulling out a small dagger, the blade glinting in the sunset. "Let's see how well-behaved you really are, pup," he sneered. Jim tightened his grip on the gun under the counter, his heart pounding. He didn't know who Emily was, but he could feel a storm brewing. The desert wind picked up, swirling red dust around the gas station. Emily remained still in her wheelchair, her right hand lightly resting on a hidden button on the armrest of a small device that no one noticed. Storm and Raven stood motionless, but in their eyes one could see a cold glimmer, like a smoldering fire waiting to ignite. "You guys should stop," Emily said, her voice now no longer a warning but a declaration. "Because if you don't, you won't like what happens next." Travis laughed, but that sound was quickly interrupted when Storm let out a low growl, not loud, but enough to make the space tremble. Hank flinched, stepping back a pace, the knife in his hand trembling slightly. The fiery sunset gradually faded into darkness, and the Desert Stop gas station was no longer a peaceful pit stop. A confrontation was about to erupt, and amidst the desolate land of Mojave, Emily Carter and her two dogs were about to teach the Iron Vipers a lesson they would never forget. The Mojave Desert is not a place of faint of heart, and Emily Carter is not one to back down easily. Under the blazing crimson sunset at the Desert Stop gas station, as the Iron Vipers surrounded her with their taunts, no one knew that this woman in a wheelchair had once been one of the finest warriors in the United States Marine Corps USMC. Emily wasn't just a veteran. She was a legend in the military K-9 community, someone who transformed the way the U.S. military utilized combat dogs, from the dusty streets of Iraq to the top-secret training bases in Texas. Emily's journey began 15 years ago when she was a 20-year-old lieutenant, freshly graduated from basic training at Camp Pendleton, California. Standing at 5 feet 6 inches with sharp blue eyes, she wasn't the type to stand out in a crowd until she spoke up or picked up a weapon. But what truly set Emily apart was her love for dogs. Growing up on a small farm near Fresno, she was used to caring for animals, from sheepdogs to noisy chickens. When she joined the USMC, she volunteered for the K-9 unit, a decision that her superiors initially deemed crazy for a young female service member. But Emily proved them wrong. In 2009, she was assigned to Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas, the heart of the U.S. military K-9 training program. There, she not only learned how to work with fierce Belgian Malinois dogs, but also began developing a new training method. "Dogs are not weapons," she would tell her training sergeant, her voice firm. "They are teammates. If you treat them like machines, you'll never tap into their full potential." Her approach focused on the bond between handler and dog, teaching them not just to detect bombs or attack enemies, but also to understand trust and loyalty. In just 3 years, Emily transformed K-9 dogs from mere tools of war into intelligent warriors capable of adapting to any situation. She named the first 2 dogs she trained Storm and Raven, names that would later become iconic in the K-9 community. Storm, with his sleek black coat and ever-alert ears, could sniff out explosives from 100 yards away with just a whiff. Raven, a bit smaller but as quick as lightning, once darted across a minefield in Iraq to rescue a team of Marines caught in an ambush. These achievements not only earned medals for Storm and Raven, but also caught the attention of a more secretive organization, DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. In 2014, when Emily was 29 years old, she was summoned to a top-secret facility near Edwards Air Force Base, just about 30 miles west of the Desert Stop gas station. It was the first time she heard about Project Horizon, a program developed by DARPA aimed at creating military dogs that would surpass natural limits. They want to combine Emily's training with bioenhancement technology, boosting muscle strength, improving senses, and even enabling communication through brainwaves with their handlers. Emily was initially hesitant. "We can't turn them into monsters," she protested during a tense meeting with scientists in white lab coats. But then she agreed, not out of ambition, but because she believed that if done the right way, this project could save thousands of lives on the battlefield. Storm and Raven became the first test subjects. Over the course of 2 years, they were injected with special biological compounds and closely monitored in a lab deep underground. The results were astonishing. Storm could lift a 200-pound weight with his jaws without breaking a sweat. Raven, with senses sharper than ever, once detected an enemy hiding half a mile away during a sandstorm. But what made Emily the proudest wasn't their strength. It was how Storm and Raven still maintained their loyalty, intelligence, and the spirit of true dogs. They weren't just weapons, they were her family. But everything changed in 2017. During a mission in Iraq, near the city of Mosul, Emily's team was ambushed. A roadside bomb exploded, tearing apart the Humvee she was in. When she woke up in the military hospital, she discovered that her left leg was gone from the knee down. Storm and Raven, despite their own injuries, pulled her from the wreckage, shielding her until the rescue helicopter arrived. That attack not only took Emily's leg, but also ended her military career at least. That's what everyone thought. After the ambush in Mosul, Emily Carter woke up in a military hospital in Germany, the strong smell of antiseptic hitting her nose. Her head was spinning, but the last memory was still crystal clear. The deafening explosion, the blinding light, and Storm's anxious eyes looking at her through the swirling dust. Her left leg was now just a void beneath the white sheets, replaced by a dull, throbbing pain that no medication could erase. The doctor said she was lucky to be alive. But for Emily, surviving wasn't a victory. It was the beginning of another battle, a battle she had never been trained to face. Storm and Raven were also injured in the explosion. Storm had several deep cuts on his back, and Raven had a slight burn on his leg. But they refused to leave her side. When the nurses tried to take them away, Storm growled, his fur bristling, while Raven lay in front of Emily's hospital bed like a living wall. "They stay with me," Emily said, her voice weak but firm, and no one dared to argue with the fierce look in her eyes. During the long days in the hospital, the two dogs were her only source of motivation. Each time Storm nudged his head against her hand or Raven gently licked her cheek, she felt a reminder they had faced hell together, and they would not give up. When Emily was brought back to the States, she faced a new reality. The USMC discharged her honorably, presenting her with a Purple Heart and a small stipend. But honor doesn't pay the bills, and the medal doesn't replace the feeling of loss that comes from no longer being able to walk on her own 2 feet. She moved into a small house in the suburbs of Victorville, California, just a few miles from the Mojave Desert, where she could hear the wind howling through barren fields every night. There, she began to learn how to live again not as a Marine, but as a woman who had to find new meaning in her life. Her first wheelchair was a bulky, 40-pound beast that made her curse every time the wheels got stuck in the sand. But Emily wasn't the type to sit around and wait. With the help of an old engineer from Edwards Air Force Base, she designed a lighter wheelchair, weighing just 15 pounds, equipped with all-terrain wheels and a hidden control system, a gift from her days working with DARPA. She didn't just want to move. She wanted to take charge, just like she used to command her K-9 unit on the battlefield. Storm and Raven changed along with her. They were no longer just regular military dogs. They were outfitted with service vests to assist Emily in her daily life. But what DARPA had done to them, the enhancement injections, the brainwave training didn't just disappear. Storm could hear the sound of trucks from 2 miles away, and Raven responded to Emily's voice so quickly that sometimes she wondered if it could read her thoughts. She kept this secret to herself, not wanting anyone to know that her service dogs were actually highly classified warriors, honed from a project that even DARPA wanted to bury. Emily's life in Victorville wasn't as peaceful as she had hoped. Nightmares about Iraq frequently yanked her from sleep. Drenched in sweat, the echoes of explosions ringing in her head, she started hearing rumors about the Iron Vipers, a gang turning the Mojave into their playground, from looting to threatening the locals. Part of her wanted to steer clear of trouble, but another part, the Marines still burning, inside her couldn't sit still. She knew Storm and Raven felt it too. Every time she looked into their eyes, she saw a readiness, as if they were waiting for a command she hadn't dared to voice yet. The fateful day arrived as she drove her white van through the Mojave on her way to a physical therapy appointment in Barstow, 25 miles from home. The gas tank was nearly empty, forcing her to stop at Desert Stop, a decision she never expected would change everything. As she rolled her wheelchair out of the van, the afternoon sun glinted off her titanium prosthetic leg, and she felt an unusual chill breeze sweep through, like a warning from the desert. Storm and Raven stepped out behind her, wearing their service vests, standing quietly beside her with a haunting calm. They were more than just dogs. They were her legacy, a testament to what she had built and lost. As the roar of the Iron Viper's engines echoed from afar, Emily didn't turn to look. She continued to pump gas, her right hand resting lightly on the armrest of her wheelchair, her thumb gliding over the hidden button she had set up long ago, a device linked to Storm and Raven, ready to activate if needed. She wasn't looking for trouble, but she wasn't afraid of it either. After everything she had been through, from the battlefield of Iraq to the top secret labs of DARPA, Emily Carter knew one thing for sure. She and her 2 dogs were never prey. And when the biker gang rolled in, she merely smiled, a cool, confident grin, as if she had been waiting for this moment for a long time. Darkness began to envelop the Mojave Desert as the fiery sunset gave way to the twinkling stars in the vast sky. At the Desert Stop gas station, the atmosphere was thick, like a storm ready to erupt. Emily Carter sat in her wheelchair, her deep blue eyes shining with a chilling calmness, while the Iron Vipers, led by Travis Claw Maddox, surrounded her with sinister grins. Storm and Raven, her 2 service dogs, lay quietly by the white van, their vests silently concealing the true strength within. But when Hank, with a gleaming dagger in hand, stepped closer to Storm, everything changed in an instant. "Let me see how well you behave, pup," Hank growled, the blade just inches away from Storm. He sneered, his cold eyes scanning Emily as if she were nothing more than a mere distraction. But Emily didn't flinch. Her thumb brushed lightly over the hidden button on the armrest of her wheelchair, a subtle move that none of the bikers noticed. "I warned you," she said, her voice low but sharp as a knife cutting through the stillness. "You should back off." Travis laughed, his raspy chuckle echoing through the gas station. "A warning? From a lady in a wheelchair? Listen up, sweetheart. We're the law around here in Mojave. You and those much of yours are going to learn to respect us, one way or another." He signaled to Hank, and the tattooed biker stepped forward, knife raised high, ready to stab down at Storm like it was some twisted game. But the moment the blade met the air in front of Storm, everything exploded. Storm was no longer a service dog. In a flash, it sprang up, its sharp teeth clamping down on Hank's wrist before he could react. A dry crack echoed as the knife fell to ground, followed by Hank's piercing scream. He stumbled backward, clutching his bleeding arm, his face pale with pain and fear. "What the hell?" he roared, but the answer came immediately from Raven. The second dog charged in like a shadow, leaping onto the chest of another biker, Jimmy, with his bright red hair, and knocked him flat to ground, its sharp claws pinning his shoulder down. Travis stepped back, his eyes wide with shock. "What the hell are these dogs?" he shouted, pulling a handgun from his belt. But Emily remained calm. She pressed a button on her wheelchair, and a small click echoed a signal only Storm and Raven understood. The 2 dogs switched into full combat mode, moving with terrifying precision, as if they were part of a perfectly programmed machine. Storm lunged at Travis, dodging the first bullet from his gun with unbelievable agility, then sank his teeth hard into Travis's calf. Travis collapsed, the gun flying 10 feet away, tumbling across the dry ground. Raven, meanwhile, was dealing with the other 2 guys, Jimmy and a big biker named Rex. With each step, Raven moved like a whirlwind, leaping onto Rex's back and sinking her teeth into his shoulder, making the giant roar like a wounded beast. Jimmy tried to get up, his hands trembling as he grabbed a metal rod from a nearby Harley. But Raven turned around, her eyes shining under the gas station lights, and charged straight at him again. The metal rod fell to the ground, and Jimmy collapsed unconscious in an instant. Old man Jim Dawson peered through the dusty window with wide eyes. The handgun in his hand trembled slightly, not out of fear, but from sheer astonishment. He had seen military dogs in action during the Vietnam War, but he had never witnessed anything like this. Storm and Raven were not just fast. They were smart, working together like a special ops team trained for years. "Oh my God," he murmured, his hand still resting on the counter. "Who is she?" Emily finally spoke up, her voice cutting through the growls of Storm and the whimpers of the Iron Vipers. "I told you," she said, her cold gaze sweeping over the bikers sprawled on the ground. "They don't need anyone to teach them. They've been trained enough." She tilted her head, signaling for Storm and Raven to return to their positions. The two dogs immediately released their opponents, stepping calmly to her side with chilling composure, as if the fight had just been a light training session. Blood dripped from Storm's jaw, but its eyes remained bright and unwavering. Travis knelt on the ground, a bloody bite mark on his leg, and looked up at Emily. The arrogance in his eyes had vanished, replaced by a mix of fear and curiosity. You're not ordinary," he gasped, clutching his calf tightly. "Those dogs, what the hell are they? And who are you?" He tried to stand up, but a single glance from Emily made him hesitate. There was something in her gaze that was not just confidence, but a deadly warning. Emily didn't respond right away. She turned her wheelchair toward the white van, as if this confrontation was just a minor bump in her journey. But then she paused, turned to look at Travis. "I'm the person you shouldn't mess with," she said, her voice low yet commanding. "And these dogs, there's something you can't even begin to understand. But if you want no more, go ahead and try again." A faint smile flickered across her lips, as cold as the desert night wind. The wind howled stronger, whipping up red dust around the gas station. The Iron Vipers, once proud and fierce, now lay scattered on the ground, groaning in pain and confusion. Jim stepped out of the store, his handgun still in hand, but he didn't need to use it. He looked at Emily, then at Storm and Raven, feeling as if he had just witnessed something far beyond anything he had ever known. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice raspy with age. Emily nodded slightly. "I'm fine, but I don't think they are." She signaled for Storm and Raven to get in the car, then pushed the wheelchair toward the van's door. But in her mind, a question began to take shape. Why was the Iron Vipers crew showing up here at this exact moment? Something bigger was happening in this Mojave desert, and she knew that this confrontation was just the beginning. As the van roared to life, the engine's roar blended with the desert wind. Emily glanced in the rearview mirror. Travis was still kneeling there, his gaze fixed on her, no longer a challenge but a new kind of obsession. She knew he wouldn't stop, and neither would she. You just witnessed Storm and Raven turn the showdown at Desert Stop into an inspiring display of strength, protecting Emily from the Iron Vipers. It was a moment that showcased unwavering loyalty and unstoppable will. Comment, "Go Storm Raven," below to support Emily's team. Each of your comments is a cheer for their indomitable spirit, helping the story reach even further. Let's rally together. The Mojave desert night was bitterly cold, the wind howling through the cactus bushes, carrying the dry breath of the desolate land. At the Desert Stop gas station, the flickering fluorescent lights cast a weak glow over the scattered Iron Vipers bikers sprawled across the dusty ground. Travis Claw Maddox knelt on one knee, clutching his bleeding calf, his gaze locked on Emily Carter's white van as it rolled away from the parking lot. Storm and Raven, her two dogs, sat quietly in the back, their eyes shining like headlights piercing through the darkness. The confrontation just a moment ago was more than a fight. It was a warning, a small crack revealing a much bigger secret hidden deep within the Mojave Valley. Emily drove slowly on Highway 58, about 5 miles east of the gas station, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. In the rearview mirror, she could still see the faint lights of Desert Stop fading away, but in her mind, questions began to swirl. The Iron Vipers were not your average bikers the way they moved, the way Travis handled his gun. Everything had the precision of trained professionals. "They're not just thugs," she murmured, her right hand unconsciously brushing against her titanium prosthetic leg. "Something bigger is going on." Inside the convenience store, old man Jim Dawson set down the handgun on the counter, his hands trembling slightly from the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. He stepped outside, his worn boots crunching on a layer of red dust, and looked at the Iron Vipers struggling to get back on their feet. Hank was cradling his broken arm, Jimmy lay unconscious next to the toppled Harley, and Rex was groaning with a deep bite mark on his shoulder. Travis was the only one still with a bit of strength left, but his once proud gaze was now replaced with confusion mixed with anger. "Who the hell is she, old man?" he barked, his voice gravelly. "Those damn dogs, they're not normal." Jim shrugged, his eyes, lined with deep wrinkles, glanced over at Travis. "I don't know who she is," he said, his voice low but firm, "but I've seen dogs like that back in Vietnam. Only the military trains them like that. She's not an ordinary person, kid." He turned back toward the store, but inside, a sense of unease began to rise. He had lived in Mojave for 40 years, close enough to Edwards Air Force Base to have heard the whispers about top-secret projects, about things the government didn't want anyone to know. In the van, Emily pressed a small button on the control panel. A touch screen popped up from the armrest of her wheelchair, displaying data she hadn't used much since leaving DARPA. Storm and Raven weren't just enhanced dogs. They were equipped with a sensor system hidden in their vests, capable of detecting chemical traces and electronic signals within a 500-yard range. The screen flickered and a message appeared. "Unusual radio frequency detected. Origin, 10 miles north." Emily frowned. "Military frequency," she whispered, her hand brushing over Storm's head resting beside her. "Someone's been communicating recently." She recalled the days at DARPA, when she used to work in a lab deep underground near Edwards. The Horizon Project wasn't just about enhancing dogs. It also involved large-scale testing of biotechnology, from chemical weapons to brainwave communication. But the project was put on hold after the ambush in Iraq, or at least that's what she was told. Now, as she looked at the data from Storm and Raven, she couldn't deny one truth. Someone was using similar technology, and it was operating right here in the Mojave Valley. Back at Desert Stop, Travis stood up, leaning on his Harley to keep his balance. He pulled a small radio from his jacket pocket, pressing the button with a tense expression. "This is Claw," he said, his voice low but urgent. "We just ran into trouble at the gas station. A woman with 2 dogs. They're not ordinary dogs. I need backup." A crackling voice responded over the radio. "Don't do anything stupid, Claw. Stay put. We'll handle it." Travis turned off the radio, his eyes flashing with a hint of fear. He knew he had just stumbled upon something far beyond the Iron Viper's control. Jim, from inside the store, heard the radio playing. He didn't catch everything, but enough to know that Travis wasn't acting alone. He had heard stories from truck drivers passing through Mojave about unmarked trucks showing up near Barstow, about strange noises coming from abandoned mines 15 miles away. Where are the San Bernardino County cops, he wondered, but then he remembered. A few months back, some local police had been bribed, turning a blind eye to the Iron Viper's robberies, claiming there wasn't enough evidence. Emily pulled over to the side of the road, about 8 miles from Desert Stop. She glanced at the screen, noticing a stronger signal pointing toward the old mines near Barstow. "Storm, Raven," she said, her voice low yet warm. "We have work to do." The 2 dogs perked up, ears standing tall, as they understood exactly what was about to unfold. She knew that the recent confrontation wasn't a coincidence. It was a piece of a larger puzzle, a conspiracy lurking in the shadows of the Mojave. And Emily Carter, despite being in a wheelchair, was still the only one who could unravel it. The Mojave sky is now a massive black curtain, dotted with stars that twinkle like the eyes of those watching from afar. Emily Carter sits in the white van, the soft blue light from the touchscreen on the armrest illuminating her face, highlighting the sharp features of someone who has faced war. Storm and Raven lie silently beside her, their breathing steady but ears perked up, ready to react to any signal from their owner. The screen displays a digital map with a blinking red at 10 miles north, heading toward the abandoned mines near Barstow. "This isn't a coincidence," she whispers, her finger gliding over the screen to zoom in on the data. "Someone is using DARPA technology." She recalled the final days at Edwards Air Force Base when the Horizon Project was frozen, or rather, hidden away. After the ambush in Iraq in 2017, DARPA announced that the bioenhancement program had failed, claiming that dogs like Storm and Raven were irretrievable mistakes. But Emily never believed that. She had seen the worried looks on the scientists' faces, the hastily deleted files, and the closed-door meeting she wasn't invited to. Now, as she looked at the radio signals on the screen of the tightly encrypted military frequency, she knew the project wasn't dead. It had simply moved to a darker corner of Mojave. 8 miles away, at the Desert Stop gas station, Travis Claw Maddox leaned against his tipped-over Harley, still clutching his bloody calf. The remaining Iron Vipers had been pulled onto the bike by their comrades, but the atmosphere was still heavy as lead. The small radio in Travis's hand buzzed again, and a crackling voice came through the waves. "Claw, where did she go?" Travis frowned, his gaze sweeping over the pitch-black road. "East on Highway 58, he replied, his voice hoarse. "She's not just some ordinary girl. Those dogs are monsters." There was silence on the other end for a moment, then a cold voice responded. "Don't let her get too far. We'll send someone over. Keep everything quiet, Claw. If she knows too much, you'll be in trouble too." Travis turned off the radio and threw it to the ground with a curse. He wasn't an idiot. He knew the Iron Vipers were just pawns in a much bigger game. 6 months ago, a guy in a black suit, calling himself a representative from Barstow, approached him with an offer he couldn't refuse: cash, weapons, and control over Mojave in exchange for absolute loyalty. He didn't ask too many questions, no need to, but now, after the confrontation with Emily, Travis was starting to feel the web he had stepped into tightening around his neck. In the van, Emily adjusted her direction, veering off Highway 58 toward the mines. She turned on the headlights, the white light cutting through the darkness, illuminating the jagged rocks along the bumpy dirt road. Storm let out a low growl, his nose sniffing the air for something. "Easy now, boy," Emily said, her hand brushing over his head. The screen flickered with new data. Unusual chemical compound detected. Concentration rising 0.5 ppm within a 2-mile range. She frowned. It wasn't the smell of gasoline or desert dust. It was a sign of something she had seen before in the DARPA lab. A biological agent designed to enhance living organisms. She stopped the car about a mile from the mine, turning off the headlights to avoid detection. Through the windshield, she saw faint, flickering lights near the entrance of the mine, not regular lights, but military-grade LED lights mounted on steel poles. "Someone's working there," she murmured, her hand activating the recording mode on Storm and Raven system. The 2 dogs lifted their heads, their eyes shining brightly in the darkness, as if they too sensed the approaching danger. At Desert Stop, Jim Dawson stepped into the back storage area of the shop, pulling out an old wooden box covered in dust. Inside was a military radio from the Vietnam era, the very one he used to communicate with his unit. He turned the knob, searching for the frequency he suspected Travis had used. After a few moments of silence, a voice crackled through. "Prepare the next shipment. Don't let her get close to the stash. If necessary, take her out." Jim jumped, nearly dropping the radio. He had no idea who her was, but he guessed it was Emily. And the shipment in the mine? He had heard rumors from truck drivers. The San Bernardino County Police had stopped patrolling that area, as if someone had ordered them to look the other way. Emily stepped out of the van, pushing her wheelchair over the uneven ground, with Storm and Raven flanking her on either side. She stopped 500 yards from the mine entrance, her eyes scanning the darkness. A black, unmarked truck rolled out from the mine's entrance, its headlights off, but she could still hear the low rumble of the diesel engine. "This isn't a robbery," she told herself, her voice low but firm. "This is an organized operation." She pressed the button on the armrest, activating Storm and Raven's sensor systems. The screen flickered. Enhanced biosignal detected. Source 200 yards ahead. She took a deep breath, feeling as if she were back on the battlefield in Iraq. But this time there were no Marines by her side, only Storm, Raven, and her own determination. She knew she had just stepped into a conspiracy far bigger than the Iron Vipers. These mines weren't just a hideout. They were the heart of something dark, something DARPA once tried to bury. And Emily Carter, even in a wheelchair, was the only one who could tear down that veil of secrecy. The Mojave night was biting cold, the wind howling to the crevices of the valley, carrying a bone-chilling chill that even a faint light from the abandoned mines near Barstow couldn't chase away. Emily Carter stopped her wheelchair 500 yards from the mine entrance, hidden behind a large rock, her deep blue eyes scanning the darkness. Storm and Raven stood close by her side, ears perked up, noses sniffing the air like perfectly programmed living machines. The touchscreen on the armrest of her wheelchair flickered with data from the two dog sensor systems. Enhanced biosignals source. 200 yards ahead. But it wasn't the data that made Emily's heart race. It was a memory she had tried to bury 8 years ago, now rising up like a ghost on the battlefield in Iraq. She took a deep breath, her exhale turning into a puff of white smoke in the cold air. "No way," she muttered, gripping the armrest of her wheelchair so tightly that her knuckles turned pale. The biological signal that Storm and Raven detected wasn't just a trace of DARPA technology. It carried a familiar trait, a mark she had seen during the final days of Project Horizon. It was the enhancement formula she had helped develop, something she believed had been destroyed after the ambush in Mosul in 2017. But if it still existed, if it was being used right here in Mojave, then a horrifying truth awaited her. The attack that cost her leg wasn't random. It was conspiracy. Memories flooded back like a tidal wave. That day, 8 years ago, Emily led a team of Marines along with Storm and Raven to the outskirts of Mosul, just 10 miles south of the main base. Her mission was to locate a cache of chemical weapons belonging to insurgents, based on intelligence from DARPA. She vividly recalled the scorching heat of the Iraqi desert, the dust clinging to her gas mask, and the roar of the Humvee engine as it rattled down the bumpy dirt road. Storm was out front, his nose sniffing the air, while Raven stayed close by her side, his sharp eyes scanning every shadowy corner. Everything was going smoothly until the roadside bomb exploded. The explosion rang out like thunder, tearing the Humvee apart into fiery metal shards. Emily was thrown from the vehicle, her ears ringing, her vision blurred by smoke and dust. She felt a searing pain in her left leg, but before she passed out, she saw Storm and Raven rushing towards her, pulling her from the wreckage with their teeth and claws. When she woke up at a military hospital in Germany, she was told that the bomb was a war accident, with no enemy identified, no leads to follow. But now, standing in the Mojave, she knew that wasn't the truth. Emily pressed a button on the screen, activating a deeper analysis of the data from Storm and Raven. The results appeared. Biological compound, 98% similarity to Horizon 17 sample. That was a formula she had tested at DARPA, designed not only to enhance muscle strength, but also to improve neural reflexes, specifically tailored for Storm and Raven. "Someone has stolen it," she whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and fear. But the bigger question was, who and why were they targeting her in Iraq? She remembered Dr. Jonathan Pierce, the head of the Horizon Project. Pierce was an outstanding but cold scientist, with salt and pepper hair and eyes that always held ambition. He had argued fiercely with Emily about expanding the project. Pierce wanted to test the formula on humans, while Emily was adamant that it was too dangerous if not properly controlled. "We can create super soldiers," Pierce had said in a meeting at Edwards Base, his voice filled with excitement. "Don't you see the potential, Carter?" But Emily had countered, "We're not creating monsters. We're saving lives." After the ambush, Pierce vanished. DARPA claimed he had retired, but Emily always had her doubts. The desert wind howled stronger, whipping up the red dust that clung to Storm and Raven's vests. Emily looked at the two dogs, feeling as if they too were reminiscing about that day in Mosul. "You saved me," she said, her hand brushing over Storm's head. "But who betrayed us?" The answer seemed to be waiting for her in the mine ahead, a place she knew would hold not just stolen technology, but also the truth about the betrayal from the past. She pushed the wheelchair closer, about 300 yards from the mine entrance, when a figure emerged from the opening. His gait was stiff, more like a machine than a human, and the LED lights from the mine illuminated his face, a face that Emily recognized instantly. Jonathan Pierce, with his salt and pepper hair now turned completely white, his eyes shining unnaturally bright, stood there like a ghost from the past. "Carter," he said, his voice deep but echoing through the stillness. "I knew you would come." The darkness of Mojave enveloped the abandoned mine, with only the faint glow of military LED lights illuminating the face of Dr. Jonathan Pierce. He stood there, 300 yards away from Emily Carter, looking nothing like the scientist she had known at DARPA 8 years ago. His eyes gleamed with an unusual intensity, as if infected by something far beyond humanity, and his voice, though calm, carried the chill of someone who had sold their soul to ambition. Storm and Raven growled softly beside Emily, their fur bristling, sensing the danger from the figure before them. "Pierce," Emily said, her voice as cold as a desert wind, gripping the armrest of her wheelchair tightly. "I thought you were dead after Iraq, but now I get it you didn't retire. You stole my work." She tilted her head, her deep blue eyes locking onto his, searching for a trace of the man she once respected. But all she saw was a ghost, a traitor who had turned the Horizon Project into a nightmare. Pierce smiled, a twisted grin that held no warmth. "Steal? No, Carter. I saved it. DARPA wanted to bury Horizon after the Mosul incident, but I saw its true potential, not just in your dogs, but in people. You're too conservative, too weak to see beyond that." He stepped closer, his leather shoes crunching against the parched ground. Still 200 yards away from her. "That ambush was an accident. It was an opportunity for me to take what I needed: your formula, your data, and those 2 dogs." Emily felt the blood rush to her head. "You sold me," she spat, memories of the explosion in Mosul flooding back smoke, fire, and the agony of losing her left leg. "You orchestrated it all, leaving me to die, all for your own ambition." Storm roared, its teeth gleaming in the darkness, while Raven shifted to the side, ready to pounce. But Emily raised her hand, signaling them to stay still. She needed to hear the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Pierce stopped, 100 yards away from her, his eyes sparkling like LED lights in the dark. "It's nothing personal, Carter. It's science. You see her as a risk. You want to control Horizon, keep it safe. But I want to expand it, turn it into something that can change the world. After the explosion, I left DARPA, took your formula, and started over here in these mines." He spread his arms, pointing toward the entrance of the mine, where dim light revealed the silhouettes of unmarked black trucks. "You see, I've succeeded. Your formula now not only enhances dogs, it creates super soldiers, beings that far surpass natural limits." Emily followed the direction of his hand, her heart racing as she realized the strange shapes moving in the darkness were neither human nor quite animal, but something in between. "You've turned it into a monster," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "Horizon wasn't meant for this. It was created to save people, not to destroy them." She pressed a button on the screen, activating the recording system of Storm and Raven. If she didn't make it through the night, at least the truth would be preserved. Pierce burst into laughter, the sound harsh and echoing through the valley. "Save people? The world doesn't need saving. It needs to evolve. And you, Carter, you're the first step. I've been watching you since you left Victorville. I knew you would come here, and now you'll see what I created." He raised his hand, and from the depths of the mine, a low growl resonated not from machinery, but from something alive and terrifying. Emily's gaze hardened. She knew she wasn't just facing Pierce. She was confronting her own legacy, twisted by the hands of a traitor. Storm and Raven braced themselves, ready to fight, but Emily felt a chill run down her spine. Pierce hadn't just survived. He had returned with a horrifying plan, and she was the only one who could stop him. But what would the cost be? If your heart beats for the loyalty of Storm and Raven, for the moment Emily confronts the one who betrayed her in the shadows of Mojave, hit like to cheer them on and subscribe to legendary narratives, so you won't miss a single moment of this battle for the truth. The Mojave night was as cold as a sharp blade, the dry air thick with the scent of dust and metal. Emily Carter sat in her wheelchair, 100 yards from the entrance of the abandoned mine near Barstow, her deep blue eyes shining with a mix of determination and terror. A low, rumbling sound echoed from deep within the mine. Unlike any natural sound she had ever heard, it was the noise of something alive, yet no longer human or animal. Storm and Raven stood by her side, their fur bristling, teeth glinting under the dim LED light from mine. In front of her, Dr. Jonathan Pierce loomed, his figure like a ghost from the past, his eyes sparkling unnaturally, as if it had become part of what he created. "What have you done with Horizon?" Emily asked, her voice low but sharp, cutting through the stillness. Her hand gripped the armrest of her wheelchair, her thumb brushing over the hidden button of a device linked to Storm and Raven, ready to activate at any moment. Pierce smiled, a twisted grin of self-satisfaction. "I perfected it, Carter," he said, his voice echoing as if from a distant place. "You only see your dogs as success. But I've gone further. I've created beings that transcend the limits of nature, warriors no longer bound by the frail consciousness of humanity." He raised his hand, and from the depths of the mind, the darkness began to stir. A creature emerged, towering over 6 feet tall, with muscles rippling unnaturally beneath its grayish skin, and eyes glowing red like the headlights of a broken machine. It was neither a human nor quite a dog, but a horrifying hybrid, with pieces of metal grafted onto its body, nerves flickering like live wires. Emily felt her heart tighten. "Oh, God," she whispered, her hand trembling lightly on the armrest. "You've turned them into monsters." Pierce stepped closer, about 50 yards away from her, his shoes pounding the ground with the confidence of someone who held absolute power. "Monster? No, Carter. This is evolution. Your formula was just a beginning, but I've stripped away the ridiculous limits you impose: balance, natural instincts, all that useless stuff. These creatures are the perfect weapons. Stronger, faster, and unencumbered by emotions." He pointed at the creature and it roared, the sound shaking the ground and sending red dust swirling into the air. Emily looked at the creature, and a memory from Iraq flooded back, Storm and Raven pulling her from the rubble, not because they were programmed to, but because they were loyal, because they understood her. "You're wrong," she said, her voice steady even though her heart was pounding. "Strength isn't everything. Natural instinct isn't a weakness. It's what makes us who we are." She pressed a button on the armrest, and Storm and Raven tensed, shifting into combat mode. The 2 dogs moved with terrifying precision, surrounding her like a living wall, their eyes glowing brightly in the darkness. The creature from the mine charged forward, as fast as a bullet, its metallic claws scraping against the ground, leaving deep gashes inches long. But Storm reacted instantly, leaping into its path with incredible speed, his teeth sinking into the creature's cybernetic arm. A shrill metallic screech echoed as Storm yanked hard, tearing a chunk of steel from its body. Meanwhile, Raven attacked from the side, jumping onto the creature's back and biting into its neck, where the artificial nerves were exposed. The creature roared, flailing its arms wildly, but Storm and Raven moved in perfect sync, dodging each blow with a grace that no machine could match. Pierce stood frozen, his eyes wide with a mix of shock and anger. "No way," he muttered, his hands clenching into fists. "They can't be stronger than my creation." But Emily knew the truth. Storm and Raven were not just powerful. They were intelligent. They had souls. Her formula didn't just enhance muscles or senses. It maintained a balance between strength and consciousness, something Pierce had destroyed in his creatures. From the depth of mind, 2 more creatures emerged, taller and more ferocious, their roars shaking the very air around them. Emily took a deep breath, feeling as if she were standing once again on the battlefield of Mosul. "Storm, Raven," she commanded, her voice low yet powerful. "Defend." The 2 dogs instantly shifted positions, ready to face the new threat. Pierce let out a harsh laugh, the sound echoing through the valley. "You think your dogs can win? This is just the beginning, Carter. I'm going to show you the true power of artificial intelligence." Emily looked at him, her gaze as hard as steel. "You've forgotten one thing, Pierce," she said, her voice cutting to the roar of the creatures. "Natural instinct never backs down." She knew this fight wasn't just about strength. It was about soul, about everything she had built and everything Pierce had twisted. Red dust swirled chaotically around the abandoned mine, the roar of the creatures created by Jonathan Pierce echoing through the Mojave Valley, drowning out even the howling wind. Emily Carter sat in her wheelchair, 50 yards away from Pierce, her gaze as steely as her heart raced with the impending threat. Storm and Raven moved like 2 shadows, confronting 3 towering creatures' biological machines with rippling muscles and artificial nerves glowing beneath their grim gray skin. Pierce stood there, his eyes gleaming maniacally, as if he were witnessing his grand dream come to life. The second creature lunged at Emily, its metal claws slicing through the air, aimed straight at her with terrifying speed. But Storm reacted instantly, leaping in its path, his teeth sinking deep into the creature's cybernetic wrist. A deafening screech of metal echoed as Storm tore away a chunk of steel, thick black blood oozing from a wound. Meanwhile, Raven was grappled with a third creature, jumping onto its back and biting fiercely at its neck, where the exposed artificial nerves lay. The creature roared, flailing its arms wildly, but the two dogs moved in perfect harmony, dodging each strike with precision that only instinct could provide. Pierce shouted, his voice cracking with rage. No way. They're perfect machines, emotionless and limitless. How could they lose to your dogs? He stepped closer, just 30 yards away from Emily, his hands clenched as if he wanted to crush something. But Emily didn't take her eyes off the battle. She knew Storm and Raven weren't just fighting with strength. They were fighting with spirit, with the loyalty that Pierce had stripped away from his creations. The first creature, despite its injuries, lunged forward again, aiming for Raven with its remaining metal arm. But Emily commanded, her voice booming like thunder, "Raven, dodge!" Raven immediately leaped to the side, narrowly avoiding the strike, then turned back to bite the creature's leg, causing it to crash to the ground with a terrifying thud. At the same time, Storm delivered the final blow to the second creature, leaping onto its chest and sinking its teeth deep into its neck, right where the artificial heart was beating. The creature collapsed, its body convulsing before going completely still. Pierce stepped back, his face pale under the LED lights. "No, it can't be," he murmured, his hands trembling. The third creature tried to get up, but Raven lunged forward, finishing it off with a precise bite to the head, where the main circuitry was exposed. Sparks flew, and the creature collapsed, black smoke rising from its damaged body. The dust settled, leaving Storm and Raven standing there, panting but unshaken, their bright eyes fixed on Pierce. Emily looked at him, her voice low but powerful. "You see, Pierce, your artificial consciousness will never triumph over natural consciousness. True strength doesn't lie in erasing emotions. It lies in balance, in what you will never understand." She signaled for Storm and Raven to return to her side, the two dogs walking with a chilling calmness, as if the recent battle was just a minor display of their capabilities. Pierce collapsed to his knees, his wild gaze slowly fading. "You don't understand," he whispered, his voice weak. "I was so close to perfection." But Emily shook her head, pushing her wheelchair forward just 10 yards away from him. "No, Pierce, you destroyed it." She knew this battle wasn't over. The mind still held other horrifying secrets. But now, she had proven one thing. Storm and Raven, with their natural instincts, were the key to stopping the nightmare that Pierce had created. The Mojave sky gradually brightened as the first light of dawn broke in the east, soft golden rays piercing to the remnants of red dust left from last night's battle. The abandoned mine near Barstow now lay in ruins, with the horrific creatures created by Dr. Jonathan Pierce lying motionless on the parched ground, black smoke rising from their damaged bodies. Emily Carter sat in her wheelchair, 10 yards away from Pierce, her deep blue eyes fixed on him as he knelt in defeat. Storm and Raven stood beside her, their steady breaths and bright eyes serving as a testament to the power of the natural that Pierce had so recklessly underestimated. Pierce lifted his head, his face pale, his once sparkling eyes now clouded with exhaustion and despair. "You don't understand," he whispered, his voice trembling like someone who has just lost everything. "I was so close to perfection, a world without limits, without weakness." He raised a shaking hand, pointing toward the mine, where the biomachines that were once his pride now lay in ruins. But Emily shook her head, her tone low yet powerful. "You didn't create perfection, Pierce. You created destruction. Those creatures didn't evolve, they were a mistake." She pushed the wheelchair closer, the wheels rolling through a thick layer of dust, just 5 yards away from Pierce. "I've seen what happens when we try to overpower nature without respecting it," she said, the memory of a rock flashing through her mind, explosions, smoke, and the loyalty of Storm and Raven as they pulled her from the rubble. Horizon isn't meant to break boundaries. It was created to find balance, to protect what we have. Storm gently nuzzled her hand, as if in agreement, while Raven stood still, his sharp eyes scanning Pierce like a final warning. In the distance, the sound of a truck engine echoed, faintly visible on the dirt road 2 miles away from the mine. Emily turned her head, realizing it wasn't the steady, powerful roar of the Iron Vipers, like that of a professional army. She pressed a button on the armrest of her wheelchair and the touchscreen flickered. Radio signal. Federal forces arriving in 5 minutes. She smiled faintly. "Looks like you're out of time, Pierce," she said, her voice calm yet icy. "The FBI has been monitoring this area for a long time. Did you really think you could hide all of this?" Pierce laughed, a harsh sound filled with bitterness. "FBI? They don't understand anything, Carter. They'll destroy everything I built, but they can't stop this idea. Someone will carry on your formula, my vision. It will live on forever." He tried to stand up, but his legs trembled and he fell back to the ground, clutching his head like a madman. Emily looked at him, not with pity, but with the resolve of someone who has triumphed not just through strength, but through faith. She turned to Storm and Raven, gently stroking their heads. "You guys did great," she whispered, her voice warm for the first time in this long night. The 2 dogs lifted their heads, ears perked up, as if they understood that the battle was over, but not everything was finished. Emily knew Pierce was partly right. The Horizon formula, though twisted, still existed in this mine. If it fell into the wrong hands, it could cause an even greater disaster. She had to make sure it was completely destroyed. The sound of the truck grew closer, a mile from the mine, and Emily heard the distant blare of a siren, a sign that a special task force was approaching. She looked at Pierce one last time, her gaze unwavering. "You were wrong to think that evolution is about erasing humanity within us," she said, her voice ringing out in the quiet dawn. "True evolution is about finding a way to live in harmony with ourselves. Storm and Raven are proof of that, not because they are stronger, but because they remain true to who they are." Pierce looked up, his cloudy eyes struggling to resist. "You're so naive, Carter," he whispered. "The world doesn't need harmony. It needs power." But his words were cut off by the roar of engines. A convoy of black SUVs from the FBI came barreling in, stopping 200 yards from the mine, dust swirling as agents jumped out, guns aimed straight at Pierce. One agent stepped forward, wearing sunglasses and black suit, his voice booming through a speaker. "Jonathan Pierce, you are under arrest for violating national security. Put your hands up." Emily backed her wheelchair up, with Storm and Raven following closely behind, her gaze fixed on the scene before her. Pierce was handcuffed, his face twisted in despair as he was pulled into the vehicle. But she knew this victory was only temporary. The mine was still there, and the secrets within it remained a threat. She took a deep breath, feeling the warm Mojave sun on her skin. "We're not done yet," she said to Storm and Raven, her voice low but filled with determination. The dawn light of the Mojave bathed the abandoned mine in a brilliant golden hue, but the air was still thick with the smell of smoke and burning metal. Emily Carter sat in her wheelchair, 200 yards away from the black SUV convoy of the FBI, with Storm and Raven standing close by her side like 2 loyal bodyguards. Dr. Jonathan Pierce was handcuffed by the agents, his face twisted in a mix of rage and despair as he was pulled toward a vehicle. But Emily's gaze wasn't on him. It was directed at the mine, where the secrets of Project Horizon were still waiting to be uncovered. She knew the battle with Pierce was over, but the real fight to protect what she had created was just beginning. The lead agent, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and a gravelly voice, stepped closer to Emily, about 10 yards away. "Ms. Carter?" he asked, removing his sunglasses to reveal sharp brown eyes. "I'm Agent Harris, FBI. We've been monitoring activity in this area for over 6 months, illegal shipments, radio signals, and even the Iron Vipers gang. How did you get mixed up in this?" He glanced over at Storm and Raven, his eyes widening slightly at the sight of the 2 service dogs wearing vests, yet radiating the aura of warriors. Emily smiled faintly, her hand brushing over Storm's head. "I'm not getting involved," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I'm the one who created what Pierce is trying to exploit. He stole my work from DARPA, and I'm here to stop him." She pointed toward the mine, where smoke still rose from the rubble. "But if you don't destroy everything into the formula, the data, all of it, then what Pierce is doing will just be the beginning." Harris furrowed his brow, looking at her with a mix of curiosity and respect. "You're talking about your project? Horizon?" He lowered his voice, as if afraid someone might overhear. "We know about that project. DARPA put it on ice after the incident in Iraq. But Pierce isn't working alone. There are others higher up funding him. Are you sure you want to get more involved?" He glanced over at Pierce, now locked inside the SUV, his gaze still fixed on Emily like a final curse. Emily took a deep breath, feeling the warm sunlight touch her skin. "I don't have a choice," she said, her voice low but filled with determination. "If my formula falls into the wrong hands, it won't just be those monsters in the mines. It will be a war not between humans, but between us and what we could become." She pressed a button on the armrest of her wheelchair, the screen flickering. "Recording complete for Horizon 17 data." She held it up for Harris. "This is the evidence. Destroy the mine and make sure no one gets their hands on this." Harris took the device, his eyes shining with seriousness. "Do you know the price of handing this over?" he asked. "DARPA won't let you off the hook, and neither will those behind Pierce." But Emily just nodded, her gaze unwavering. "I've already paid with my leg in a rock," she said, her hand resting on her titanium prosthetic. "I'm willing to pay more if it means the world doesn't have to suffer through what Pierce has done." The sound of sirens blared as the agents began to seal off the area, 100 yards from mine. Harris turned back to the convoy, commanding, "Get the explosives ready to level this place." Emily watched, feeling as if a heavy burden had just been lifted. Storm and Raven nuzzled against her, as if they too understood that this was a victory not just over Pierce, but owed a greed that had distorted her work. As the sunlight streamed through the valley, Emily rolled her wheelchair toward the white van, with Storm and Raven following closely behind. "We did it," she whispered, her voice warm yet tinged with exhaustion. Pierce had failed, not because he was weaker, but because he didn't understand that true evolution isn't about conquering nature, but living in harmony with it. But deep down, she knew the story wasn't over. The ones behind Pierce were still out there, and she would have to confront them someday. The Mojave sunlight flooded the valley, casting a golden hue over the parched rocks and the remnants of red dust left from the terrifying night. The abandoned mine near Barstow was now just a pile of rubble, the explosion from the FBI's explosives echoing 10 minutes ago, obliterating every trace of the Horizon project that Dr. Jonathan Pierce had twisted. Emily Carter sat in her wheelchair, 300 yards from the debris, her deep blue eyes watching the black smoke slowly dissipate into the air. Storm and Raven lay quietly beside her, their service vests covered in dust, but their bright eyes still radiated the resilience of warriors who had stood with her against the darkness. Agent Harris stood next to a black SUV, about 20 yards away from Emily, holding a small radio to report back to headquarters. "The area has been cleared," he said over the air, his voice deep but steady. "No sign of Horizon 17. Pierce is in custody, and we have evidence from Carter." He glanced at Emily, giving a slight nod as an unspoken thank you. She responded with a small nod of her own, her hand brushing over Storm's head, feeling the warmth of his sleek black fur. This was a victory, but not the kind of victory she had dreamed of when she joined the U.S. Marine Corps 15 years ago. She turned her wheelchair toward the white van parked about 50 yards away on the bumpy dirt road. The sound of the FBI convoy faded into the distance, leaving her with the stillness of the desert, a stillness she hadn't felt since leaving Iraq. "We did it," she whispered to Storm and Raven, her voice warm yet tinged with fatigue. The two dogs lifted their heads, ears perked up, as if they understood that this was not just the end of battle, but the beginning of something much bigger. As she opened the valve, a memory flashed through her mind of lying in a military hospital in Germany, her left leg gone, and Storm and Raven refusing to leave her side even as the nurses tried to pull them away. It was the first time she realized that true strength doesn't lie in the body or technology, but in connection, in the natural bond that Pierce had tried to erase. She smiled faintly, feeling as if a weight had just been lifted. "You guys are my family," she said, gently patting Raven's back. "And we've proven that." In the distance, the sound of a motorcycle engine roared, but it wasn't the aggressive growl of the Iron Vipers. It was a steady, familiar hum. Emily turned her head and saw a group of riders on Harley-Davidsons approaching, about a mile away on Highway 58. As they got closer, she recognized them as veterans, their leather jackets adorned with the insignia of a Marine unit that had once been stationed at Pendleton. The leader, a man in his 50s with silver hair and a scar face, pulled up about 30 yards from her, turned off the engine, and stepped off his bike. "Miss Carter?" he asked, his voice hoarse yet warm. "I'm Jack Riley. I served in Iraq back in 2009. We heard about what happened in the mine from the truck drivers in Barstow. You did something remarkable last night." He glanced over at Storm and Raven, his eyes shining with respect. "And I take it these dogs aren't just pets, are they?" Emily nodded, her gaze locking with Jack's. "They're my teammates," she said, her voice steady. "We stopped something that could destroy everything, not just here, but everywhere." Jack smiled, stepping closer, just 10 yards away from her. "I've seen K9 dogs in action on the battlefield," he said, "but what you're doing with them is something unprecedented. We want to help you if you need it." She looked at Jack, then at the veterans behind him, their weathered faces lighting up with hope. "I'm not sure what I need right now," she said, her voice low but sincere, "but I know we can't let this happen again. People like Pierce never stop." Jack nodded and reached out his hand. "Then we'll watch out for each other," he said. "You're not alone, Carter." Emily shook his hand, feeling the strength and the grip of someone who had endured war, just like her. The sunlight illuminated her face, highlighting the tiny wrinkles around her eyes, marks of years filled with struggle and loss. She knew this wasn't the end, but rather a beginning she could rebuild, not with technology or power, but with faith in humanity and the gifts that nature provides. The Mojave sunlight had now flooded the valley, chasing away the shadows of night before and draping everything in a warm golden layer. Emily Carter sat in her wheelchair, about 10 yards away from the group of veterans led by Jack Riley. Storm and Raven lay quietly beside her, their eyes bright like flames that would never go out. The veterans' Harley-Davidsons were scattered along the dirt road, 300 yards from the crumbling mine, the engine silenced, leaving space for the gentle desert wind to whisper through. This was no longer a battlefield. This was where hope began to sprout from the ashes of ambition. Jack Riley stepped closer, just 5 yards away from Emily, his eyes shining with the determination of a man who had faced war and survived. "We didn't just come to say thank you," he said, his voice rough yet sincere. "We heard from Victorville that the folks, they were talking about a woman with 2 dogs who stopped the Iron Vipers. They don't know the whole story, but we do. You did what the military couldn't. You protected Mojave, and maybe even the whole world." Emily looked at him, then at the weathered faces of the group of veterans behind her, those who had once been soldiers, who had lost comrades, who had fought for what they believed in. "I'm not doing this alone," she said, her hand brushing over Raven's head, feeling the warmth of its fur. "Storm and Raven are the reasons I'm still here. They're not just dogs. They're proof that true strength doesn't come from destroying nature, but from living in harmony with it." Jack nodded, a faint smile on his face. "I once had a K9 dog in Iraq," he said, his voice dropping as if lost in memory. "He saved me from a landmine 20 years ago. I understand what you mean. Dogs like that aren't just warriors, they're family." He turned back to his team, signaling, and a man stepped forward, holding a small wooden box. "This is a gift from us," Jack said, opening the box to reveal an old Marine Corps badge, engraved with the words, "Semper Fidelis, always faithful." "You deserve it, Carter." Emily received the badge, her hand trembling slightly as it touched the cool metal surface. "Thank you," she said, her voice catching a bit not out of weakness, but from the feeling of being recognized after so many years of solitude. She pinned the badge to her shirt, right over her heart, where it still beat fiercely despite the many scars her body had endured. "But this isn't the end," she said, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "People like Pierce may have failed, but his ideas are still out there. We have to stay vigilant." Jack nodded, his gaze serious. "We'll be here," he said. "Mojave is our home, and you've given us a reason to protect it." The group of veterans behind him nodded in agreement, their Harleys roaring to life, the sound of the engines echoing like a promise that they wouldn't let this valley fall into darkness again. Emily pushed the wheelchair over the white van, with Storm and Raven following closely behind, the sunlight glinting off their fur, highlighting a natural beauty that no technology could match. She opened the van door and turned to take one last look at Mojave. No more mines, no more piers, just a vast desert and the people ready to rise up. "We did the right thing," she said to Storm and Raven, her voice filled with inspiration. "And we will keep doing it, not for power, but for the humanity within us." As the van rolled down Highway 58, heading towards Victorville 25 miles away, Emily felt a cool breeze wafting to the window, carrying the taste of freedom. She knew the future would bring challenges, but with Storm, Raven, and people like Jack by her side, she believed that true strength of balance between humanity and nature would always prevail. Thank you for joining us on the emotional journey of Emily, Storm, and Raven in the Mojave Desert. From the betrayal in Iraq to the victory at the Barstow Mine, they've shown that true strength doesn't lie in technology, but in loyalty and a deep sense of purpose, a valuable lesson for all of us. If you love this story, please hit like and subscribe to the Legendary Narratives channel so you won't miss out on other inspiring journeys. We truly appreciate your support. Every like and subscription motivates us to share more heartwarming stories. Goodbye for now, and thank you for being here with us. We'll see you in the next video. Stay tough, stay proud, and see you soon.